Welcome once again to our esteemed panelists. Bilin, you did a great job of introducing them, but I'm going to add a little bit more color to each of you four. So besides being non-executive chairman of Bajaj Electricals, Sailesh, you have a lot of accolades to your credit. You're a chartered and cost accountant and an internal auditor. You were conferred the Global Competent Boards designation by Competent Boards in Canada. You have the Vivekananda Sustainability Award in 2022, honorary PhD, and directorships in many companies. Welcome once again. Jan, independent non-executive director of CTRIM. You're the chairman of the CSR committee and member of the audit committee, and you've had significant roles in banking, shipping, oil and gas, and nuclear industries in both business development, finance, and general management. Welcome.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, independent non-executive director of Singapore Post. You sit on the finance committee, the investment committee, the sustainability committee, the nomination committee, and the corporate governance committee, and also your day job of being Asia General Counsel of 3M Asia. Thank you for being here. Rani, our good friend from Malaysia, independent non-executive director of the Minority Shareholders Watch Group Malaysia, founder and CEO of Capital DX, one of only 2 entities registered by the Malaysian Securities Commission as an initial offerings platform. Formerly Chief Commercial Officer of Bursa Malaysia, also formerly the Chief Regulatory Officer and Chief Legal Officer. Huge amount of experience amongst them in this board. We are indeed very, very lucky to have you four. So if I could get you started on the first question. Is that going to come up on the screen as well? So what aspect of the research report, I know all 4 of you have read the research report quite thoroughly. What aspect of the research report or anything that Sunil said that struck out for you, either it surprised you or you found it most useful? Let me start with you.
Well, thank you, Rajiv. Let me first start out by congratulating SEC in the publication of this very important piece of work. It's an insightful report. I especially like that it's not limited to just Singapore, but it extends to covering 11 countries across APAC. So it gives us a broad overview of the sustainability journey of companies in this region. To your question on my initial reaction to the report and what struck me, I would say that broadly, the findings do resonate with my lived experience, that the level of awareness of the importance of sustainability has certainly increased in recent years, but I also agree that I find that many may be holding back on giving these issues full expression. The one particular thing that struck me, especially as I was flipping through the report, being a Singaporean, was on page 29, where SAC highlighted that apparently the dominant governance model for sustainability in Singapore is that there's none. In other words, I'm reading that to mean that if you look at an average Singapore company, you'd be hard-pressed to find who or what function is responsible for sustainability. Now, I find that less surprising than it is a tad disappointing, but that only goes to show that we still have a lot of work to do, and that reaffirms the need for us to keep bringing sustainability to the table as an important agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. I think when I look at this statistic with 73% says that ability is the main inhibitor or stalling reason for not bringing this to the board. I think honestly you can't sideline or put them aside intent and ability. It's a stair. The intent is basically the foundation. And when people say that they don't have the ability, I mean, everybody is on a learning journey here. And it starts with the intent. If the intent is not there, it's not going to be brought onto the board. It starts with the intent, then all of us has to learn. It's a new journey for all of us. It's complex and it's moving super fast. So I think we have to start with the intent and getting that right.
So you're saying that the lack of knowledge that they're talking about is really stemming from the lack of intent.
Exactly.
Yes, where there's will, there is a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Thanks. Rani.
Congratulations to Rajiv and team, right, on this excellent report. I think what strikes me as being, very poignant is the fact that, it emphasizes a lot on the value and purpose aspect, right? Which to my mind is very key as we move on to the next journey. I say the next journey because I think in the region that we are in, regulators have played a very, very important role, right, in fostering sustainability. So you'll find that a lot of boards in this region focus a lot on compliance, right? It's there. So, for example, Malaysia, where I come from, the Securities Commission, the Central Bank, and the Stock Exchange have been very active, right, in fostering that. So I think for the next step, right, to ensure that, sustainability can be practiced in a meaningful way, then, naturally, the intent and the ability part that the report talks about is very important. And also what I really like about the report is that, it's not a report that is merely providing you, a lay of the land and landscape as to what's happening for knowledge purpose, right? But it's also actually providing tools to companies, right? So it's a very useful report. The diagnostic, for example, right, will enable boards to actually question as to where they are in the journey, right? And then the steps that are provided there, right, can actually be meaningfully and usefully applied by companies. So I really look forward, Rajiv, for you and team to come over to Malaysia as well and, present this report.
Thank you. I have a follow-on question for you. You've been a regulator. Now you're an entrepreneur, but you were a regulator for many, many years, right? And you picked up on the purpose and values piece. And wherever we talk to people in Asia, what I hear when I talk to people is regulators need to do more. They need to give us a greater stick. Only then will people in Asia behave. And you as a regulator is saying, no, it's not so much about the stick, it's more about the values and purpose. Say a bit more about that.
So I think, in every market generally, right, it always starts with regulation, right? If you look at boards as a whole, right, there's a lot of emphasis on, financial performance. But I think the change is now coming about because stakeholders are demanding, right, that companies adopt better practices. So in Malaysia, for example, all institutional investors have incorporated, the ESG lens into their decision making, and they are engaging with the board. And this is the conversation that they're having with the board, where they want to see sustainability being integrated into strategy and decision making. Hence, I think it's very timely, the report, right? Because boards are starting to talk about, how do we embed sustainability in a more meaningful manner. So that calls for, company to be very clear about the purpose and its values and then filtering that culture through the whole organization. So if you look at Unilever and its living plan, right? Paul Polman would not have been successful, right, if the entire organization did not embrace it. So from that perspective, I think, Rajiv, this report is very timely.
And you rightly picked up on Polman's tenure at Unilever. He went way beyond regulation. He wasn't doing it because of regulatory pressure. He went way, way beyond that. Thank you. Silas, your thoughts from looking at it from an India perspective as you were reading the report sitting back at home. What did you pick up?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Sustainability Asia, for inviting us and bringing us together like this in this fantastic, with this fantastic audience. I must compliment Sunil, Jane, and the whole team for the extraordinary report. What stood out for me is the call to action and the conviction that you can do well while doing good. And I think that message is so powerful. It came across with passion and commitment, even in Sunil's presentation this morning, which I really marked. When I was seeing Sunil present, it was so genuine. He really meant it. And that stands out from this report. And the reason why it stands out is that our world is going through multiple phase change transitions. The first one is driven, as we see it in India, by artificial intelligence. We have, for the first time, an ability at the board level to co-pilot with information and data and everything that the report talks about by simply deploying the right kind of intelligence, which is now available democratically at a cost which is very affordable. The second thing that I'm seeing is that we are ushering in an era of quantum computing, and we are not realizing that the biggest risk that we as a economic community face is not having quantum safe encryption. Our current RSA encryption will be broken by a quantum computer very soon. And it is high time that the whole world wakes up to the reality that we need to seek and find an absolutely new way to keep our information and data secure.
Couldn't agree with you more. In our last research before this one was focused more on boards. The previous one was more on the management of the company itself. We identified three biggest existential challenges: climate change and its related effects, of course, inequality. And the third was misuse of technology, cyber vulnerability, and all the things that you're talking about. Those three were the main ones. So thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
And
Very good.
Very, very finally, I'd like to say that with AI available and deployable at boards, we now can craft our paths to net zero with far greater clarity.
That's if we use AI in the right way. But more about that in a little bit. But thanks again for raising that. Let me move on to the next one. Can I have the next slide, please? And one more click. So here's the question for you. Directors in Asia, all 700 of them that we surveyed say, yes, sustainability is very important. Yes, it should be an integral part of strategy. Yes, it should be part of our purpose. But yet, if you look at these numbers, they're not doing much about it. Right? Only 21% of boards say that we discuss it as a full board and in all board meetings, and many say never, as Sunil pointed out earlier. And then, the other one that, when you're hiring new directors, it's not important. So on the one hand, they're saying that it's very important. On the other hand, they're not doing anything about it, or not doing enough about it, as these numbers are pretty glaring. What are your thoughts? Anyone who would like to go? What's the real reason here? Why this inaction, despite, as Sunil says and Jane say, the heart is in the right place?
Well, maybe I'll start out first. In the 1970s, Milton Friedman, he's a classical economist, and he wrote a seminal article in the New York Times where he asserted categorically that the sole purpose of a corporation, not one of the few, but the sole purpose of a corporation was to make money, was to maximize profits for its shareholders, so long as it does so within the boundaries of the law. Now, I think that classical view of a corporation is still deeply entrenched in the mindsets of a lot of business leaders today. But if you contrast that view with more modern thinkers like Simon Sinek, now Simon Sinek argues that a company needs to ask about why it exists, what purpose does it serve? And he further argues that companies with a greater purpose beyond just fattening the purses of their shareholders, they tend to achieve more enduring success. Now, if I were to paraphrase the force of Simon Sinek's argument, it would be like this. Better it is for a company to be in existence for 500 years than for it to make it to a Fortune 500 list and then disappear within 20 to 30 years. So we have these two contrasting philosophies in the background. And when we appreciate this, it becomes clear why many boards still hold back on the sustainability agenda, because they still conceive sustainability as a cost to business.
So you're saying that the majority boards are adhering to the headline of the 1970 op-ed of Milton Friedman.
They may be entrenched with that mindset.
Yeah.
And because of that, they view sustainability as a cost, and it detracts from the bigger goal, the more important goal on profit maximization.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that you say this? Because if you look at the history of wealth creation, the same Milton Friedman argument comes up every single time. But if you look at the history of wealth creation, whether it was Rockefeller, whether it was Andrew Carnegie, whether it was J.P. Morgan, whether it was, any of these so-called, there was a series on BBC called The Men Who Built America, and men, sadly, ultra amounts of wealth were created when an entrepreneur was able to put his or her finger on the biggest pain point of society and find a profitable solution for it. That's how all this wealth, whether it was oil or lighting or anything, was made. And Milton Friedman goes on to say that, look, if it is right for your business to do the right thing, then do it. There's no problem. So then why do we only always blame Milton Friedman, and why do we use that as a crutch to say that's how boards react?
Well, may I also respond to that?
Yes, please.
Now, my perspective is that we do need to acknowledge, at least in my view, that sustainability is a question of balancing. But it is not a question of balancing between profits and cost. But I think that it is a question of balancing between the short term and the long term. How much do we want to focus on the short term? And how much do we want to focus on the long term? And what I mean by this is that a lot of companies may solely focus on the short term, and hence they do relatively well in the short term. But they will cease to exist if they do not invest sufficiently into the future. But on the flip side, a company cannot also afford to focus solely on the long term, because we need to continue to generate profits in order to continue to exist into the future. So at the end of the day, if I were to put this in another perspective, the fact that many boards may hold back on sustainability, we don't blame it on Milton Friedman, but it's a reflection more of a struggle in striking the right balance between how much I want to focus on the short term versus the long term, and it's a matter of judgment.
Sailesh, on this long-term versus short-term, you sit on many boards. This conundrum of balance comes up all the time.
It's a fantastic point Elizabeth makes, and there are certainly two sides of the coin. But what we are attempting to do at several enlightened boards is to change the conversation and say that sustainability is now a business imperative. Because simply, if you take the long-term costs and the long-term desirability and ability to make the profit, then it is essential that you go deep into sustainability. And I give one example which sort of sent the message home. The marginal cost of producing solar power in India is 2 rupees. The last PPA was signed at rupees 199 paisa. Whereas the cost of producing fossil fuel based power is 7x. So at the margin, the entire economics has changed. And if we can point this out strongly and make sure that the board's information system captures these issues, then we will be able to get the right values and get the right action and prove that doing good also means doing well.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, your thoughts on why this inaction, even though the heart is in the right place?
I think there's two situations. I think there's a situation where you're gonna do tomorrow, or you think you're gonna do tomorrow, what you've been doing yesterday and the day before, but in a more sustainable way. And then there's a situation where you are in a transformational shift as in energy, where we know that oil and gas is being phased out. And what we been doing the last 50 years will not be what we're gonna do at least in 30 years. I'm not saying tomorrow, I'm not saying in 10 years, but we will be phasing out. And that creates a different sense of urgency. So I think also for us in Seatrium, it's clear we don't think we have a business unless we transform into a renewable company within the next coming years. We need to position ourselves for the client. But I think the question goes broader than that, also to industries that may not think they are as affected. Let's take meat, for instance. I mean, going back a few years, we have started seeing substitutes like Impossible Meat, Beyond Meat. People are become vegan. So that might not be sustainable business models. Even food in general has been seen as a long-term, not very much changing things. So I think it's a strategic realization of the context what you're working in. Is it really going to change materially? And I think there's a number of industries where it's bluntly clear it's going to change, and it's going to change now. And others where it's a bit more blurred. But I think all of us as boards have to really dig deep on this and see.
But what you just said is, to me, basic business, right? I have to look at my business today, and I have to look at my business for tomorrow and the next 10 years. And as a CEO, as a board director who has been a C-suite executive in other places before becoming a board director. You all are very seasoned. All boards are very seasoned business executives. That should be the first response, isn't it? That we have to look at today and we have to look at tomorrow. If we only look at today, then it's not going to work. Then why doesn't it happen, Rani? What is this? I mean, it's commonsensical. Why does it not happen?
Short-termism, right? Most CEOs are on a 3-year contract. So what do you
Okay.
expect them to do,
Yeah.
right? So it's challenging. I really think that we should do away with quarterly reporting and earnings guidance, right?
Here
And
speaks the regulator. Yeah.
Institutional investors cannot blow hot and cold, right? So if you are committed to ESG, right, then you have to give the latitude to your investee companies, and allow them that time and that opportunity, to embed this, and perhaps to incur that higher costs, and maybe there's lower earnings. So I think a lot of CEOs find and boards find that very challenging, right? Whilst the institutional investors on the one hand say, yeah, focus on this, and then there's when the earnings are not so good, right, as a result of maybe some new initiatives that they've gone into, it's not looked at kindly. So I think there's a lot of tension, in the board, coming
And then
from that.
Quarterly earnings is also a matter of choice, right? A board can decide that they don't want to give quarterly guidance.
Not in Malaysia, for example. It's mandatory, right?
Is
in
it?
many markets, it's mandatory. Yeah. So maybe I think these are some issues for the regulators also to think about. Yeah.
Okay, very good, very good. So Jan, you looks
But,
like
I think also, I mean, a lot of things are quite easy, low-hanging fruits today. So that there's actually no excuse for getting going. A lot of the initiatives that we do on decarbonization of our own business actually makes good business sense. It's going to be difficult 2030 and beyond. I mean, that's going to be difficult. When we looked at our DE&I policy, maybe 60-70% is already in place, because it made sense. It made sense to have an equitable access to promotion. We need to develop our talent pool. So there's a lot of things that we do right now. It doesn't come with a massive cost. So just get going.
I want to pick up on something you said earlier, which is, can I have the next slide, please? So you said, what you picked up was that 73% of directors said that they don't know, they don't have information, they don't have knowledge. And I find that fascinating too, just like you. Is that really true? That 73% are saying, I can't do anything because I don't know, because it's too complicated? Or is that an excuse for something different, something else? I mean, what is so difficult about understanding that the climate change is going to end life if we don't do anything about it? That inequality is rising to alarming levels. And to your point, Sailesh, if we don't do anything about cyber vulnerability, technology, which is supposed to make life better, is going to end it. How difficult is it for anybody to understand this? So how do you explain this 73% number? Is that a cover for something else that's going on in terms of this inaction?
Well, let me take that. I think we need to couch everything we talk about sustainability in much simpler terms than we do today. And I think we need to bring it to the level of common understanding. Examples we are able to give. There's so much migration happening because people are climate refugees. We saw that in no less a sophisticated and developed part of the world as California. I mean, I know of families which actually moved up to Seattle simply to avoid the fires coming and burning their homes. And so, with example, with simplicity, with clear, defined cost parameters like energy, like EV, like bringing in a diversified workforce, like bringing in a governance mechanism which will mark risks in the right manner. If these become the language of sustainability, then I think we have a better chance to get this at least 73 reversed to 37.
So you actually think that there is a knowledge gap here, and it's got nothing to do with the short-termism, Rani. It's not a cover for that short-termism that you were talking about.
I think yeah on this issue of information, right? I'm just having a chat with a very senior director from a bank. So they have a sustainability committee, right? And they drive sustainability strongly. But when I think he talks about information, it's from the perspective that the businesses down there are not actually escalating a lot of the information up, right? That is useful for the board. And in this day and age, right, where you've got a lot of tools out there that can analyze data, right? There's the lack of use, of all of these tools out there. For example, AI is an example. So I think the more mature board, when they talk about the lack of information, I think they're talking about useful information that comes to the board that can enable them, to translate that to proper strategies, to translate that into decision making. But I think, when you look at the smaller boards, the non-large cap, right? So there, the lack of information could actually mean that, the directors themselves are not well versed, right, in sustainability, well versed in the business of the company, right? And so therefore, right, they are not actually able to appreciate, the significance, of sustainability. So that's why in Malaysia, for example, right, every new director that's coming onto the board is actually required to undergo a mandatory training on sustainability, right? This is an appreciation of the fact that at a very fundamental level, they need to understand sustainability. Only then they can go to the board, ask the right questions, and be able to have that information to discharge their role.
Fair enough. And I wanted to just come to you, if I may. The idea here is that to solve for climate change, inequality, and cyber vulnerability, we need innovation, innovation, innovation. We need to find profitable solutions to these challenges, right? Because charity and other things are not going to solve this. Profitable solutions. And Elizabeth, you come from a company that has a long history of innovation, 3M, right? For that innovation to happen, I mean, when you are trying to create something that doesn't yet exist, nobody knows anything. And Jan, you and I were talking about it earlier outside, that it's a new thing, nobody knows. And when you're trying to invent or innovate the next new thing, nobody knows what's going on. And it's business leaders and board directors that come together and figure it out. So in that context, how do you explain the 73% and how do you turn the tide towards innovation?
Well, I was about to respond that I find the 73% saying that they have no knowledge, unfortunately, to be not credible. Because in this day and age, how can you not have knowledge when you can easily access it? So it's a question of whether you want to access it. If you don't have it right now, you can easily hire somebody from external and then come to your organization to boost up your knowledge, immediately. Engage advisors. It's all there. I do think, however, that a key reason beyond short-termism and profit maximization mindset that we talked about earlier is the question that boards and companies may say that they've got more pressing fires to fight. Now, to a certain degree, I can sympathize with that, because if you have a fire in front of you, you want to put that out first. And you tend to find it tempting to put sustainability in the back burner because it tends to be a longer term issue. So I suspect that might be, what is holding them back from immediately reacting to getting more information. Yeah. And to that, though, on the question of I've got more pressing fires to fight now, sustainability can wait. I mean, I would highlight this fact, which is that if you look at the companies that used to be listed in Fortune 500 a mere 20 years ago, 50% of them, more than 50% of them, no longer exist today because technology is advancing so rapidly that virtually no industry is left untouched by disruption. So we are all undergoing transformation of sorts, and we cannot afford to then say that let's put sustainability aside and we'll turn to it when we've sorted out our own transformation, because it is going to be a constant. So we need to find a way to do two things in parallel at the same time.
Fantastic. That's exactly what we need, right? Jan, just to continue that dialogue, if I have the next slide, please. So staying with this theme of innovation, things that seem what you were talking about earlier that we have to think about not just today, but tomorrow, right? A lot of boards, a lot of directors also express their inability, saying, but I am the fiduciary of the shareholder. I have to maximize return to shareholder, right? Sunil mentioned in his presentation earlier that according to the World Economic Forum estimates, climate change alone provides $10.1 trillion of annual new business opportunities for the next 30 years, and 395 million possible new jobs, right? So as fiduciaries, yes, you're the fiduciary, your responsibility is towards the shareholder foremost. How can we change this narrative from climate risk to climate opportunity? Building upon what Elizabeth was saying about innovation.
I think for the way we've organized it, we have an integrated assurance framework that handles risk, and climate risk is one part of it. What we're looking at it as sustainability and sustainability strategy is a kind of integrated thing. We're looking at how we're going to make sure that we have this company in 30 years, in 40 years. How do we position ourselves best in this space? We see a massive transition in the energy space. Oil and gas have been dominating for a while, but new forms will be coming in. And so we're looking at it, both all our investment decisions, all our moves in a sustainability lens. It is about being a fiduciary, not just for the short term, but for the longer term, and to see how can we position ourselves best as a company to take this opportunity. And I think the risk part of it in our board is important. We need to handle it. We need to ensure it. It's a massive transformation for us. But the opportunity space is much bigger. I mean, we have committed to 40% of our business in renewables. It's a massive transformation from being almost 100% oil and gas. But the opportunity is out there, and we put it into our management scorecards. It's in our model. We are doing information campaigns throughout the company to make sure that everybody's aware. That
And what role the board is playing in this?
Well, I mean, the board is first of all, it's discussed in every board meeting. We've chosen
In every board meeting.
In every board meeting, we have chosen to have a sustainability committee in this. For a number of reasons. It's complex, I acknowledge that, and it's changing fast. So we need to spend quite a bit of time on sustainability. We have gone from, first we needed to merge two companies, align it, but also to define it, how it's going to play out in the future of our strategy. So it's in every board. We have a sustainability committee. I meet with the head of sustainability every month to actually discuss, align with the board, align with the management, make sure that we're on the right path. So quite an active role in this. We also have a board that actually engages with clients, stakeholders, investors. We've just been in the OTC in Houston 3 weeks ago, 4 board members, engaging with a number of clients and stakeholders. So quite an active role.
Coming back to your earlier point, it's about the intentionality with
Yes.
which you're doing it. Very good. I think I'm going to pause here and open it up to the floor for questions. I'm sure many of you have questions for the panelists. So shoot off anything that you'd like to ask, either about the report or from the experience of the panelists. And I will get you a mic if you would just raise your hand. There you go. Can we get a mic there, please?
Good evening. Thank you very much for your sharing. It was very insightful. My name is Nele Cornelis, and I'm the director of the European Chamber of Commerce. So if I may say that European companies are always front runners in this field. So, but I'm not going to ask a tough question. I'm going to make a little bit of a remark. I very liked the idea that the question of sustainability is the balance between profit and cost, but also the balance between short-term decisions and long-term decisions. But I want to add 2 more dimensions on it. For me, the third dimension here is everybody involved, all the stakeholders, the full value chain. And there also comes challenges, because making decisions in the board is not only about your company, it's also about your suppliers. It's about the scope 3. And then we have real challenges, because these suppliers might not have the sources to meet the expectations of your company or of the regulators, or basically, building together the future. They need some support. So I think in the board also that discussion need to come forward. And the
Couldn't agree more.
fourth dimension is finance. So the banks, the financing of all these efforts, I think the financial institutions also have a key role to play. And I think that is also a dialogue that need to be on the agenda of the board. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. No, I absolutely agree. Any other comments or questions?
My name is Shahrukh Marfatia. So first of all, thanks. This has been an amazing expose on some of the key findings and on the dilemmas that we all face as boards. But I wanted to raise another question. While I understand that the boards need to lead this and drive it, I'm a little concerned that there's got to be a push and a pull dilemma that's also not happening, which is the executive team also has to put sufficient pressure on the board and the other stakeholders to make this happen. We haven't spoken about that.
Any reactions, anyone on this?
I think Shahrukh is absolutely spot on. Nothing can happen only by board intent. It can only happen through the collaborative process where all the people in the company believe that sustainability is the right thing to do. And I'd like to add value to everything you said. Scope 3 is becoming a subject which is entering board discussion very rapidly. And what is happening is that for the primary player to actually export and supply goods to, say, Europe, they need to make sure that the entire Scope 3 emissions are actually taken care of. And therefore, that conversation has begun. And that conversation cannot happen without, as Shahrukh puts it, the entire value chain in an organization getting committed to it and making sure that they would put in the effort. One other related point I'd like to make, and it also speaks to the previous conversation we were having, is the idea of premiumization. And I'll share with you my experiences on two boards which are highly polluting companies, cement. So what we did is we brought the sustainability agenda onto the wholesome subs in India, largely because we said we need to move into alternative fuels and burn municipal waste and plastic in our kilns to reduce the footprint. And it worked because that led to the whole idea of green cement and therefore premium cement. In Blue Star, which is an air conditioning company, again, similar kind of negative connotation, board discussions on what we need to do on sustainability led to a completely new business model to get into heat pumps, which are becoming the new thing that Europe is demanding at a scale that they've run out of people to actually install them. And so there is tremendous opportunity in sustainability.
And Shahrukh's absolutely right. It is driven by management. But here we are talking specifically about the role of the board as to, because as Sunil pointed out earlier, it worked in Unilever, it did not work in Danone. Right? Sorry, Jan, you said.
I think you're right, Shahrukh. I completely agree. What we've been doing in our discussions had this guiding line that it has to make business sense and it has to make sense to the business. And I think we could probably have arrived at our sustainability vision within a 5-hour board meeting and gotten to it and come up with roughly the same goals and targets. That was not the difficult thing. The difficult thing is to actually think about how can you get there. Do we have a realistic plan for this? And that's a way to work with management and get them on board.
Absolutely.
If the board just hands out targets and leaves it to management to implement them, we won't get there. We need to bring them on board. So that journey and that time we need to spend in order to get there. If not, you will have a disconnect between the management and the board, and you won't get anywhere. So
Couldn't agree more. The idea idea here is not to put the onus only on boards. The reason for this discussion, I couldn't agree more, is to what is the role of the board here? And so you're right.
Rajiv, I'd like to comment on your earlier question and also to add on to what my fellow panelists have shared. When you talked about, why don't we look at sustainability as, room for opportunity, business opportunity? Now, I'd like to highlight something that may not be immediately obvious to a lot of people, especially in the context of listed companies, which is that if we look at the history of how long a CEO remains as a CEO, it's 4 to 5 years. And for board directors, what's the tenure? We're talking about maybe 9, 10 years. So if you actually recognize this, then sometimes the fact that we don't remain on the board long enough may be a reason for not actually having that long-term thinking. Then we talk about how then, in spite of these structures, we encourage people to move in your charter to becoming true stewards, or if not, then the risk managers. Now, the true stewards are those, in spite of how long you stay in a role, you believe that sustainability is important in and of itself, and you believe that it is a sustainable competitive advantage, and you believe that you're here on a temporary basis, and you just simply pass on the baton to the next management or to the next board. Whereas the risk managers may be looking at sustainability as Sunil talked about in his introduction, that even though you may not be internally convinced on the importance of sustainability, but you're pragmatic enough to recognize that the ground has shifted, that your investors are demanding that of you, your customers are looking at your footprint, in carbon footprint, and even your employees and those are looking to be employed by your company and asking you questions about how
It's a pain
serious
point,
you
yeah.
are in your sustainability practices. So these leaders may not be internally convinced, but they are reacting to it. And then the next question to me is, how important it is for us to distinguish the risk managers from the true stewards. For me, I think that at the end of the day, so long as we have sufficient number of us who are intrinsically motivated, that we form the tide to lift everyone up, that even if you may not be internally convinced, you have to swim with the tide, that is a win. Because at the end of the day, it's the outcome that matters, and it is always that much more difficult to try to influence and change another's intrinsic motivation.
I think but you raised something incredibly important here, which is the intrinsic motivation. We looked at, now we have a database of about 500 companies, but we looked at the initial set of 100 companies, those who were actually doing well by doing good. And what was driving that was not regulatory pressure, was not cheaper capital, was not incentives. It was driven by intrinsic motivation, values, and purpose, as Sunil was talking about over there. All right. So it looks like you
Yeah,
have
so
a comment.
just one perspective, right? As the adage goes, right? What doesn't get measured doesn't get done, right? So I had my own experience, right, when I was implementing the sustainability roadmap for my own company, right, my previous job, and it wasn't easy getting the business leaders, right, to in fact buy into the whole idea. So I find that the alignment between board and management is very essential, right? And one thing that actually leads to the building of the culture is setting the right KPIs. It starts there, and culture takes a long time to build, right? But when you have that measurements in place, you will eventually get to that very strong culture. So I think it's absolutely important for boards to actually set the right incentives. So even for board members and management, right? I mean, many companies actually don't have a sustainability KPI, for example, right? So that's a good start as well.
Very good. Okay, we are close to time. I believe there was a question here on this table. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm actually from my ICD, one of the partners for the research. It's after the discussion, it strikes me that we're talking about big company. Yeah. It happens that I'm working with as a nominee directors of World Bank in a company which is very micro customers, like only 5 million rupiah in maximum loan. So I was thinking, can you all share what a fiduciary responsibility can be implemented in such a small company? For sure, because the mission is to empower women, it is a long-term company. They want to be existing for a long term for empowering women. But they have to concentrate also on the short term to make sure that the company is sustainable. The question is, looking at the result of the research, which is only observing the boards in the big company, what can a very small company, which is representing a mass companies, mass numbers of companies, of small SME, of business social like we do, what main fiduciary responsibility that has to be implemented for the small companies in order to be regarded as sustainable company? Thank
Fair
you.
enough. Let's have a quick comment from one of the panelists on this.
Yeah,
before
I must share with you that about 2 years ago, I decided that I should change the board mix that I'm addressing myself and move to a lot of startups and small companies. And to share with you my experience, I think the conversation on sustainability is so much easier in a startup and in a smaller company because there is already that heart and soul in it. So let me give you the example of Swiggy. Swiggy is a food delivery company and is also now into instant commerce. And the question that we were asking is, how can we make the entire process more sustainable? And we came up with 2 or 3 very interesting ideas of empowering all our delivery partners with EV scooters, 2-wheelers, for example. And what that did is it got us not only loyalty, but also reduced the cost of actually delivering what we wanted to deliver. Much less maintenance, much better. Take another very small enterprise which was supplying machinery to mines, small SME enterprise. They discovered that if you can switch the vehicles in the mines to hydrogen or to EV, you can save a huge amount on the cost of power. And they went for it simply because there was an economic imperative, there was heart and soul in it, and because if they want to supply to the big boys, then it is very important that they are themselves in the path of sustainability.
So again, it's about innovative business models, right? Which SMEs are inclined to think about from their survival depends on it. Very good, very good, excellent. We could talk about this for hours. Maybe we'll take more questions offline if you don't mind. They'll all be here for a little bit. Unfortunately, we are running out of time here. I want to just ask you all 20 seconds or less to your fellow directors. What's one message you want to leave today? 20 seconds or less. What would you say to fellow directors? The one thing they can do individually in whichever board they sit on more of.
I think we all know that we need to set the tone right at the top. But what I want to add is that as a board director, we need to back management up. We need to support them if they want to think longer term when it comes to, being a buffer for them against short-termism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't agree it's only about KPIs. I think it's actually about going through the journey, finding out what is material to your business. How does this affect your strategy? And how do you position yourself right? Sustainability for me is not a separate strategy. It's a part of your business strategy. You need to think about how am I going to make sure that this company exists in 30, 40, 100 years? And how do I create a great company based on this?
And be that voice on the board.
Yes.
Rani.
So sustainability is a journey. Most companies start off with regulatory compliance, right? But my message to directors, right, as to the stage that we are at today, is to really embrace the value and purpose, right, in the companies that you're in. Foster that very strongly and build that very strong culture that then leads to not just regulatory compliance, but management of the risks and taking advantage of the opportunities, and thereby also, right, making this world a better place for all of us.
Thank you.
My message would be that the board is a team, and you are a natural leader because you have come onto a board. And so make sure that the entire board lives, breathes, and acts on sustainability.
Very good. Well, as I said, thank you very much. Your knowledge sharing and the knowledge in this room, we could continue talking for another hour at least. But I'm sure you'll hang around a little bit because there are some more questions and we will mingle informally and continue chatting a little bit more. But with that, I want to say thank you very much to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found it as insightful as I did. A big round of applause.